Alright guys, welcome back. Uh, this is Seth and you're watching my YouTube channel, How I Think, and thanks for watching my videos. This is part 2 in a series of SharePoint videos which I'll be demonstrating how to install SharePoint and the configuration, backup, and so on and so forth. Part 1 was the installation of SQL 2008 R2 and all the prerequisites for SharePoint. So if you're not seeing that video, I highly encourage you to go to my channel, watch that video, then come back to this one. This is part 2. This is the actual installation of the software. So we'll go ahead and click on install SharePoint. What this is going to do is it's going to go through and ask for a key. Alright, so now that I've inputted the key, I'm going to click on accept. Now we're going to hit continue. Now, because we're going to be installing this SharePoint with it as a farm, so obviously we're going to click on farm. Standalone is, once again, when you install standalone, everything gets installed on the same machine, and it's difficult to upgrade in the future. Plus, it uses SQL Express, so you really don't have any scalability. Server farm gives you the greater flexibility because you can incorporate additional servers, kind of take some of the load off the server, do some balancing, availability, high availability, clustering, and so on and so forth. So obviously much better. And you can install a farm on the same machine. It's just that the way it's installed, you have greater flexibility. So we're going to click on server farm. Now once again, it's going to ask you again, are you sure? So we're going to make sure we hit complete and not standalone. So file location, obviously if you're going to be installing this in a on a real nice server, so you're going to be putting this on a different spindle, not on the OS drive. So we're going to click on complete and we're going to click on install now. This is going to go through and do the installation. Alright, so once installation is complete, we're going to get this little box that says Run Configuration Wizard. So you want to leave that check mark and click OK. Click Close. Alright, at this point we get this little prompt that says Welcome to SharePoint Products. And it's gonna tell us that we need to have a database name. So we're going to go ahead and click Next. It's going to tell us that these services will start. Hit yes. Now right here, if we had an existing farm, we can add this server to the farm by clicking on Connect to an existing server farm if we were incorporating additional servers into it. Since this is going to be a brand new farm, we're going to click on Create a new server farm, and we're going to hit Next. So it's telling us what is the server name. Well, since we're installing this on the same machine, we're going to call it SharePoint 2, and here we're going to go ahead and type in the name of the SharePoint farm account that we created. If you remember from part 1, we created multiple SharePoint service accounts, and one of them was SharePoint farm account. Well, that's where you use that because we're installing the farm. The database name is the server itself right now because everything is installed on the same server. Now, if you were typically in a production environment, if your funds allow it, you're going to have like a two-tier installation, which is you're going to have the SQL Server on its own chassis separate. In that case, you would specify wherever the SQL Server is. So that server name will specify here. In our case, everything is on the same server. So we're going to go provide our credentials and we'll hit next. Alright, passphrase. So here it's asking us for a specific passphrase that we have to come up with, and that's for if we were installing additional servers within the farm, it would ask for that passphrase. So if we chosen the first option, which says connect to an existing farm, it would have asked for this because we would have already provided that. And this is kind of tricky. You have to have some special characters and uppercase and lowercase and all this crap. So we'll go ahead and give it a real juicy passphrase. Just make sure you remember that. We'll hit next. Alright, so it's gonna so by default what SharePoint will do is it'll create it'll give us one application, and that's called the central administration web application. That's what you use to create other sites and administer SharePoint. And so it's telling us it's going to go ahead and create that for us and wants us to specify a port. You can leave the default port, or you can specify any port that you want. You can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or anything. It doesn't really matter what port you want to choose. You can choose any ports that you want. It'll go ahead and install that for us. We'll choose NTLM and hit next. So we'll kind of go over our configuration, and we'll hit next. This is going to go ahead and set up our SharePoint environment for the first time. It'll create that SharePoint central administration application for us, and we'll use that to go ahead and create other applications. Alright, so the configuration was successful, and it has created our very first site for us. So at this point, guys, I think we're done. SharePoint has been installed. We're going to hit finish, and now what it's going to do is try to open up the SharePoint central administration site that we just created. If you notice, it's going to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 port that we had specified. Well, that's what we specify. It could be anything. You could leave it default or whatever, and that's where it's going to go to. So once this goes ahead and opens up, it's going to tell us the basic information about our SharePoint. So there we go. So it's telling us to do the initial configuration for the very first site. No, I do not want to participate. And so here you're going to click on Start the Wizard, and it'll ask you certain questions, what account you want to use, and the site that you want to create. This is how you would typically do it. So what I want to do is I don't want to do this just yet, so I'll go ahead and hit cancel, and we'll come back to that. I'll go ahead and hit cancel, and this is going to put us back into the main central administration site, and this is how it looks like. So you have your application management. This is where you're going to create all your your web applications. This is where you're gonna go ahead and manage them. This is how you monitor security, backup, upgrade your services that are configured, and the accounts that you use. Everything is done through this central administration site. Very powerful. What I also wanted to show you was quickly, we can see all this, but how it relates to IIS in the background. So we'll go ahead and open up IIS Manager. And if you notice within IIS that it has created a central administration site for us, And if we go ahead and go into edit bindings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's the port we're using. So this is where it creates the site for us. Application pool, we see that the central administration is using the SharePoint farm account, and it's running. And so this is the back end of it. It's basically all, everything is done within IIS. So we'll minimize this. So so right now it's pretty much done. The basics are there. So now what we want to do is just create a site for us, so users can feel somewhat welcomed when they go to their site. Because right now our SharePoint is up, but nobody knows how to get to it. There's nothing there for them to see. So what we'll do is we'll click on Configuration Wizard, and if you okay, so we're going to click on Launch Configuration Wizard, and if you notice, this is the same screen that we saw in the beginning. So we can go through Start the Wizard, and if I click on Start the Wizard, this is going to ask us what account we want to use. If you want to use a different account, you can do it here, and all the different services that are going to start with that account. And you can check mark and whatever services you want enabled for this site, you can start them here. So that so we'll go ahead and do this. We'll just use the existing account. It doesn't matter. For security purposes, they'll tell you not to use this. It's a big no-no. Typically, you would want to create maybe a SharePoint services account and use that here instead. But whatever, I'm gonna uncheck some of these services that I don't need. Let's see. Okay, so we'll go ahead and click on Next. And this is in the process of creating our second our first site application. Just like SharePoint created central administration for us on port 12345, we're going to go this is creating our very first site for us on port 80, so that people can get to. That's what they'll see when SharePoint starts up. Alright, so it went through and created whatever it needs to do. It created the our first site for us. Now it wants us to name it, so we'll call this very conveniently our first site. This is our very first site. Yay. I'll go ahead and install it in the default location, and I'll go ahead and I'll just use the default template too. So we'll click OK. Alright, so we'll go ahead and click on Finish. And we're back to our central administration. Okay, so if we open up our web browser and go to http and our server name and hit enter. Oops. Because it's on port 80. Hit enter, and we'll go ahead and pull up our very first site. It's a bit slow. Hey, there we go. So our first SharePoint site is up. So as you can see, we're basically completely done. People can be happy now. You're the hero. You install SharePoint. You'll get the raise. SharePoint is up. From here, I mean, there's a lot you can do. It's very in depth. So you can, there's libraries. There is security. There is, I mean, you name it. There's going to be things that you can do with this. One thing I did notice, and you probably will notice also, is when you set up SharePoint for the very first time, sometimes users may not be able to access it. They'll get access denied. What you want to do is you're going to click on Site Creations and go to Site Permissions. And here you want to go ahead and make sure that you give them the appropriate permissions. So you can click on Grant Permissions, and then you from your domain controller, you want to make sure that the domain users or whoever that site is for, if it's for accounting, you want to make sure that the accounting group and so on and so forth, they all have the appropriate permissions. So at this point, we're pretty much done. Also, I wanted to quickly show you that within IIS, if we go ahead and refresh this, now we have a SharePoint application. Well, that's what we just created on port 80. And so you can see the relationship. It's good to check here also just to make sure everything's working well. So we know it's working. We created the site. If you go back to Central Administration, here if you click on Application Management, you click on Manage Web Applications. Well, this is where you would manually instead of using the wizard, you can come here and create the application, and that's what we'll do. We'll go ahead and create the application. We'll create another application, and we'll incorporate DNS into it. So instead of going to the server name, if you're going to create a site for just accounting, we'll create accounting dot your server, your domain, and it'll go right to their site. So that's going to be in the next video. So stay tuned. So at this point, SharePoint is completely done. Great job. You got SharePoint up and running. You should be happy. So please stay tuned for the next video. We'll go through the manual site creation, and after that, we'll go through the backup and restore using using the backup backup options built in here, and the restore options, and also using the SQL backup. So stay tuned.